The summer storm began as a smear of charcoal across the Texas horizon, but within 15 minutes it had matured into a full-blown electrical siege, drumming on the glass walls of Austin, Bergstrom like impatient knuckles. Terminal C glowed sodium yellow, a hive of laptop screens and restless passengers, when Flight AA-1473 flashed the word delayed across every gate monitor. The collective groan vibrated through the concourse, but no one felt the disturbance settle more acutely than Covey Leroy Harper, wedged against the window in seat 12A of the motionless Airbus. Covey, 35, founder and CEO of Harper Quarters, had engineered his life to run with spreadsheet precision. Every Monday he flew to Chicago for exactly 42 hours of site inspections, board sessions, and 7-minute standing huddles. Tuesday nights he caught the red-eye home, slept in the air, and woke in Austin already halfway through Wednesday's inbox. Routine kept the past at bay. Interruptions invited chaos, and chaos, he knew from seared memory, could upend a family in a heartbeat. The pilot's apology crackled overhead, ground stop for lightning within 5 nautical miles. Folks, we'll keep you posted. Around Covey, seat backs clicked upright as travelers defaulted to frustration rituals, frantic texting, throat-clearing sighs, angry jokes no one found funny. He exhaled through his nose, 4 counts in, 6 out, then glanced at the vacant seat 12B, grateful for a bubble of silence. It lasted 39 seconds. A woman hurried down the aisle, escort card fluttering from her lanyard. She wore canvas sneakers the color of sea glass, a cotton sundress drenched at the hem, and a nervous smile that looked halfway between apology and wonder. The flight attendant pointed toward 12B, the woman mouthed, "Thank you," and slipped in, dripping rainwater onto the carpet. "Sorry," she whispered, peeling a strand of wet hair from her cheek. "I nearly boarded the wrong flight." "No harm done," Covey answered, reflexively polite. He forced his gaze back to the tablet balanced on his knee. 3 miniature conference windows waited, partners in Boston, investors in Seoul, a design chief in Prague, each expecting Covey to talk them through the new HQ Flex floor plan iteration in precisely 7 minutes. But the Wi-Fi handshake stalled, then spun into a wheel of death. Storm interference. He swore under his breath, softly, but apparently not softly enough. The woman beside him flinched. "Storms make everything difficult," she offered, voice light but sympathetic. Her accent carried a hint of southern plains, maybe Oklahoma, maybe northern Texas hill country. She rummaged in her tote and withdrew a boarding pass. Before Covey could glance away, she began to fold it, crisp creases, careful alignment, until the rectangular paper morphed into a tiny crane. She set it on her palm, breathed once, and it seemed to tremble as if preparing for flight. "Origami?" he asked, despite himself. "My grandmother taught me on long car rides," she said. "You pick up a habit of turning useless minutes into shapes." She turned the crane to show its wingspan. On one folded edge, Covey spotted the Harper Quarters logo, the stylized HQ, and, in bold type, the section labeled Interview Guest. His eyebrows lifted. "You're heading to Chicago for a Harper Quarters interview?" She bit her lip and nodded. "First round for the Community Outreach Fellowship." Everything happened so fast, application, phone screen, this ticket, they booked the flight before I could ask questions. Covey's HR team never arranged travel for initial interviews, algorithmic video calls filtered the early pool. Something in the system had glitched, or someone in HR had exercised unapproved initiative. He should have clarified immediately, but an irrational impulse for anonymity tugged him back. Instead, he said, "Chicago's a good city for first flights." The woman laughed, a bright, bell-like sound that made Covey's stomach tighten. "I'm Emery Sloan, by the way. Friends call me Em." She offered her hand, palm faintly cool from rain. "Covey." He shook once, careful. Eye contact blossomed, her irises were moss green, ringed with hazel, and for a breath he forgot about the spreadsheet churning behind his eyes. A flash tore across the tarmac, instant thunder rattling the fuselage. Emery jumped, hands snatching the armrest between them. Instinctively, Covey covered her knuckles with his. Her skin was smooth but tense as coiled wire, his own pulse, usually as predictable as seconds on a clock, jerked into an unfamiliar rhythm. "Sorry," she murmured again, withdrawing. "Lightning. It's fine." He flexed his fingers, surprised to feel warmth linger. The flight attendant began distributing plastic cups of water, a peace offering for the delay. Emery accepted one, then dug into her tote again, producing a battered notebook whose craft cover was tattooed with doodles of coffee cups, leafy branches, and a single phrase in looping cursive, "First brew free." She opened to a blank page, smoothed it flat, and started sketching, quick confident lines that resolved into an architectural corner, brick walls, pendant lights, a barista bar shaped like an anvil. Without thinking, Covey leaned closer. "Coffee house," he guessed. She nodded, cheeks coloring. "Dream blueprint. A cafe where every customer's first cup is on the house. My parents ran something similar back in Garland until rent tripled." "That's generous business," he said. "Generosity builds loyalty." She shrugged, eyes still on the drawing. "Economics come later." Covey almost laughed. HarperQuarters ran on predictive analytics that scalpel-edged margins to decimal points. Yet here was this drenched stranger preaching trust over profit, and some reckless part of him felt the axis of his Tuesday schedule tilting. Another lightning boom shook the cabin, but the gate monitors flickered from delayed to new DEP, 10:55 a.m., only 45 more minutes. Passengers cheered weakly. Covey refreshed his tablet. Conference apps had expired. His check designer sent 3 question mark emojis followed by "ping me when you land." For once, he didn't rush to salvage the meeting. Emery folded another crane, this one from the napkin beneath her water cup, and set it on his tray table. "Lucky mascot," she said. "For safe takeoff." He traced the delicate wings. "Thank you." Lightning flashed again, but farther now, islands of brightness receding eastward. Rain eased to a mist, runway lights blinked alive. The engines whirred as ground crew signaled pushback. Covey inhaled, exhaled, 4, 2, 6, and felt the knot inside him loosen. Maybe routine could stretch. Maybe chaos sometimes arrived wearing sea glass sneakers and carrying paper birds. He turned to Emery. "Would you like some practical interview prep? I happen to know a little about HQ's culture." Her smile widened, equal parts relief and excitement. "I'd love that." So while the Airbus taxied toward a clearing sky, the anxious CEO and the first-time flyer bent their heads together over a notebook, plotting answers to questions she hadn't yet been asked and, though neither understood it yet, sketching the first faint outlines of something neither schedule nor storm could prevent from taking shape. Chicago greeted Emery with a gust of lake wind that whipped her hair across her cheek and carried the faint scent of diesel, roasted almonds, and rain-washed concrete. She followed the tide of travelers onto the blue line, clutching the printout that said her interview would take place at 1100 Fulton Market, Suite 2200. The train clattered through tunnels and rose onto elevated tracks. Steel skeletons flicked past the windows, and in every reflection she saw her own wide-eyed face and the origami crane she had tucked into the notebook's elastic band. 25 minutes later she stepped onto a platform bordered by murals and advertising billboards big enough to eclipse the sky. The walk was supposed to be 7 blocks. She counted them carefully, feeling the ridges of ancient cobblestones through the thin soles of her sea glass sneakers. Fulton Market was a canyon of converted warehouses, cold brew cafes next to terrazzo-floored tech startups, butcher shops that had become art galleries. Number 1100 matched the address, but instead of a glass and steel office tower she found a mid-century warehouse swaddled in scaffolding and plywood hoarding. Heavy brushes of blue paint announced a furniture brand she didn't recognize. A laminated sheet on the construction fence listed permit numbers, but nowhere could she see HarperQuarters. She checked the email again. The address was right, the suite number was right. Maybe HQ leased floors above the showroom. Emery approached a temporary entrance guarded by an exhausted security guard in a neon vest. He thumbed through a clipboard when she asked for suite 2200. No such suite, he said. The building topped out at 4 floors open only to installation crews and the brand's interior designers. Cold worry spidered up her spine. Had she misread the invitation? She thanked the guard and stepped aside, heart hammering. Her phone buzzed with a Chicago area code. She answered breathlessly. Ms. Sloan. A woman's voice, brisk, efficient. This is Karina Gomez, Executive Coordinator at Harper Quarters. Mr. Harper asked me to apologize for the mix-up and to escort you personally. Are you still near Fulton Market? Relief nearly buckled her knees. I'm at the building now, but I can't find. No problem. Our actual construction site is 2 blocks south, 610 Lake and Morgan. Walk to the freight lobby, security has your name. Emery set off again through drizzle that smelled like pennies and ozone. At 610 she encountered more scaffolding, but the lobby gleamed with polished concrete and touchscreen kiosks. A guard handed her a hard hat and a neon safety vest as if this were part of the standard interview wardrobe. The freight elevator groaned upward, stopping at floor after unfinished floor until it sighed open at 22. Bare metal studs framed walls that did not yet exist. Powder-fine drywall dust floated in pale shafts of light from floor-to-ceiling windows. Near the south corner stood Covey, no blazer today, just rolled shirt sleeves, a reflective vest, and a white hard hat tucked beneath his arm. For a heartbeat she was too startled to speak. This was the stranger from the plane, not the unknown CEO she had pictured. He smiled, sheepish but genuine. We have a habit of tearing spaces apart before we decide what they'll become. Thank you for trusting an address that wasn't on any map. She found her voice. So this is HQ. This will be, he said. Our flagship hub opens in 6 months. The 22nd floor is reserved for what the architects call a community anchor. We've spent 6 weeks arguing about what that means. He gestured her forward onto the raw concrete. Tape outlines on the floor marked future zones, a rectangle labeled stage, a semicircle marked gallery, and an asymmetrical polygon annotated bar/cafe. Emery knelt, fingertips brushing chalk dust. She could already imagine color, sun-bleached brick cleaned to reveal burnt orange clay, brushed metal cup hooks, long communal tables of salvaged oak. I saw your sketches, Covey said. The free first cup model intrigues me. Loyalty through generosity. We haven't costed it yet, but I did some napkin math at 30,000 feet. It can work. Emery swallowed. You traced margins on a napkin? Old habit, he admitted. But numbers mean nothing without story. I believe you have a story that belongs here. He handed her a rolled blueprint. She unscrolled it to reveal a detailed coffee bar shaped like her anvil design. I stayed up after we landed, he said. Had my lead designer send this from Prague. Thin lines indicated plumbing drops, pendant lights, even shelving heights that matched her sketchbook proportions. A sticky note in the corner read, scale variable, await Sloan's final concept. She felt suddenly weightless, as though the wail of a passing siren far below had lifted her from the concrete. I haven't even interviewed. Covey pointed at the blank windows framing a skyline darkened by the receding storm. Consider this phase 1. Phase 2 is across the river. An hour later they were in his driver's car, winding along Kinsey Street to an old red brick grain storage facility overlooking a branch of the Chicago River. The building was vast and decaying, broken windows, graffiti ghosts, the scent of damp wood inside. But the bones were magnificent, 30-foot corner pillars, a timber roof that could be restored, views of water and skyline that no leased square footage uptown could match. This warehouse was a rail-to-barge terminal, Covey explained. We acquired the deed last month when the city threatened demolition. I call it our chaos laboratory. He handed her a flashlight. Emery walked between towering columns, toes scuffing sawdust and pigeon feathers. Her imagination painted string lights swooping through rafters, an espresso machine's hum echoing off brick, open mic nights with local poets, co-working nooks hidden between old grain silos. She turned, backlit by the cavernous entrance, and saw Covey watching her not like a venture capitalist assessing ROI but like an architect waiting for a verdict. "I could build my grandmother's welcome into this space," she said softly. "A first cup is a handshake. Free refills for folks who bring a new friend. Friday evenings, pottery will pop UPS, jazz trios, string art workshops for kids." He let the silence settle before he spoke. "I can fund renovation, equipment, initial payroll. In exchange HarperQuarters takes 20% until the build-out is repaid. After that, we're equal partners. You run the concept. You own the vision." Emery's heart pounded at a pace that once would have triggered panic, instead it felt like the quickening before a leap into a lake on a blazing day. "Why me?" she asked. "Because you turned a flight delay into cranes," he said. "Because you saw possibility in a boarded-up doorway and folded fear into architecture. I need someone who can teach my company that kind of courage." Her throat tightened. Water dripped from a cracked skylight, tapping dust-covered boards in the rhythm of a metronome. She extended her hand. He took it, steady, warm, confident, and for the first time since childhood her skin did not rebel at a stranger's touch. The handshake was brief but decisive, a contract sketched in heartbeat language. As they left the warehouse, afternoon sun broke through ripped clouds and beamed across the river, gilding broken windows with molten light. Covey's phone chimed, another calendar alert he would usually prioritize, but he silenced it without looking. Emery tucked the blueprint under her arm, feeling its edges bite softly into her ribs like proof that the day had happened. They stood by the water watching a tugboat push a string of rust-red barges toward the lake. The sky was clearing fast, gulls wheeled in crisp white arcs, and far behind them the city's mirrored towers caught the sun, throwing it back in shards of silver. Emery inhaled the smell of river wind and wet brick. For the first time since her parents had closed the doors of their café, possibility felt tangible enough to taste. And somewhere in that moment, quiet between sirens and hammer strikes and ringing phones, Covey realized the storm's delay had not broken his schedule, it had broken it open. The next morning Emery arrived at the warehouse before dawn, guided by the thin silver of her phone's flashlight and the distant caution blinkers of a towboat easing through the river channel. Chicago's summer air already hummed with humidity, each breath tasted faintly of metallic water and toasted grain that had seeped into the joists decades ago. She climbed the temporary plywood steps and stepped into the cavernous dark. Her sneakers scuffed across the aged timber floor until she reached the loading dock window where sunrise would eventually pour in. For now, only the halo of a street lamp filtered through broken panes, dust motes swirling like shy fireflies. She unrolled the blueprint Covey had pressed into her hands, a full-scale coffee bar sketched with exacting attention, plumbing stubs, drains, conduit chases. Someone in Prague had machine-plotted this overnight. Emery ran her fingertips over the vellum, half expecting the ink to pulse with kinetic life. A sudden rush of doubt bubbled up. She had never managed construction crews, negotiated vendor bids, or balanced a retail P&L beyond the bake sale budgets she kept for her pottery youth program. HarperQuarters had resources, but resources could overwhelm as easily as elevate. If she failed, she wouldn't just lose a job, she'd squander the trust of a stranger who had turned his schedule inside out because she folded cranes and believed in free coffee. A heavy door groaned open behind her, the beam of a bigger flashlight carved the gloom. "Thought I'd be first," Covey's voice said, softer than the echo around them. He wore dark jeans and a faded Georgia Tech sweatshirt, sleeves pushed to elbows. In one hand he balanced 2 cardboard to-go cups, the other held a roll of painter's tape. He passed her a cup, single-origin Guatemalan brewed at HarperQuarters' downtown hub on his way here, and pointed the flashlight at the blueprint. "I promised you blank space," he said. "But blank doesn't mean unsupported. Walk me through your wish list." The warehouse lights flicked on section by section as an electrician arrived to test circuits. By the time pale sun bled through the clerestory windows, a ring of portable work lamps illuminated a makeshift conference zone marked by 4 milk crates and an upturned cable spool. Emery sat on a crate, notebook balanced on her knee, explaining her concept: an order counter shaped from reclaimed red oak joists, a pour-over lab visible to guests, communal tables built from freight dock planks sanded but not lacquered smooth so grain still told its story. She wanted a tiny gallery wall where employees could sell personal art with every dollar going to a neighborhood food pantry. She pitched Friday night, first cup story sessions, where a customer got the mic and the second latte free if they told a 3-minute tale of risk. Covey listened in stillness that wasn't passive, his eyes translated each idea into square footage, line item cost, possible municipal permit codes. When she paused, he asked questions that sharpened instead of shrinking. How many seats per linear foot of bar? Could the gallery wall spin on hinges, doubling as sound baffle panels? Where would she hide the dishwasher to preserve the raw aesthetic but pass health inspection? They carved answers on scrap plywood with a carpenter's pencil, laughing when sawdust stuck to Emery's lip balm. At 9 a.m. the first contractors arrived, led by Luciana de Souza, Site forewoman whose hard hat bore scuffs like battlefield notches. She glanced at Covey, then at Emery's sneakers and clipboard. "Your show?" she asked. "Our show," Emery corrected, pulse fluttering. She laid out the blueprint, highlighting the coffee bar footings that needed trenching, the plumbing run to tie into the building's century-old cast-iron drain. Luciana arched a brow, then nodded, respect granted pending proof. By noon the space roared with reciprocating saws and the percussive thunk of sledgehammers busting long-abandoned conveyor tracks. Emery fetched water jugs, labeled salvage stacks, and learned the Spanish for "watch your head" and "nail gun behind you." At 2:30 a box truck delivered reclaimed barn siding from Indiana, the driver insisted on COD. Emery's card bounced, daily limit. Her stomach dropped until Covey stepped from a cloud of demolition dust, face streaked, phone already dialing the finance department, raise Sloan's ceiling to 50 grand, tag expenses to community anchor 22. This is priority A. His tone held no hint of rescue me machismo, it was just infrastructure. The afternoon blurred into a kind of purposeful cacophony. Emery measured twice, trusted Luciana's crew to cut once. She sketched signage concepts between bursts of compressor noise. Every hour or so, she'd glimpse Covey across the floor, perched on a ladder adjusting insulation tape, kneeling with a junior architect to outline a duct chase no mechanical plan had anticipated. He moved with an economy that surprised her for someone reputedly chained to meetings. Dust layered his hair silver, sweat darkened the back of his sweatshirt. Once their eyes met across a span of dangling wires, and without exchanging a word they both took the same long breath, in, hold, out, as if pacing each other's heartbeat from a distance. Sundown smoldered orange through the massive west windows when Luciana declared the day's goal met, conveyor tracks gone, bar footprint chalked, drainage core sampled. Crews packed tools. The cavern fell silent except for the river-licking pilings below. Emery leaned against a column, exhaustion and exhilaration twined tight. Covey approached with 2 bottles of electrolyte water. "You ran a crew of 12 on your first site day," he said. "Most MBAs I hire take a month to quit apologizing." She drank, wincing at the tang, then asked, "Does this pace scare your investors?" "Investors scare easy," he admitted. "But progress at visible speed calms them. Tomorrow I'll walk Darrow Ridge through the numbers. He funds the flex floor expansions, he'll want proof you're not an unvetted passion project." The name nudged a soft pang of imposter syndrome. "Will Darrow ask about my resume gap? 2 years caretaking my parents after they lost the cafe, no formal management titles." "He asked about revenue models," Covey said. "I told him risk is a synonym for potential. We'll give him projections in the morning." A tugboat horn moaned downstream, vibrating through the timber floor. Emery followed the sound to the open loading bay, stepping into twilight thick with river mist. Neon from a rooftop sign across the water painted ripples magenta. She realized she could fall in love with this gritty horizon line, maybe already had. Covey joined her at the railing, elbows brushing. She felt again that strange absence of panic at contact, replaced by a hum that traveled her skin like current. "Tell me something," she said. "You live by calendars. How do you fit chaos into a schedule?" "I didn't," he answered. "But the scheduler's learning." He tilted his phone, the screen displayed tomorrow's agenda. Blocked from 10 to 10:15 a.m., amid budget reviews and investor calls, read, unstructured, watch demo wall dry, breathe. Another 10-minute slot at 3 p.m., random dance break, mandatory. Emery laughed, a soft spill of sound. "You're serious?" "I never schedule what I won't honor." She reached for his phone, thumb hovering above the screen. "Add one more." She typed, 5:30 to 5:40 p.m., first coffee free, 2 participants. She hit save. Calendar accepted the entry, turning the rectangle sea glass green. "You understand this obligates me to coffee at your bar before it exists," he said. "Deadlines accelerate when caffeine dangles," she replied. For a moment they simply watched the river, its black surface scribbling reflections of distant traffic lights. Then Covey cleared his throat. "There's dust in your hair," he said, and without thinking brushed a lock behind her ear. His fingers grazed her temple, lingered a fraction too long. Emery's breath hitched, not in panic, but in awareness of the tilt in the air between them. She set her water bottle down so her hands wouldn't tremble. Somewhere in the rafters a pigeon fluttered, sawdust spiraled downward like slow snow. Covey's hand dropped back to the railing, but he didn't retreat. "Tomorrow," he said, "is another demolition day. Ridge arrives at noon. Be ready to tell the barn-siding story, the why, not the how." She met his gaze. "I'll be ready." He nodded, but before turning away added, "And thank you, for folding my precious schedule into something messier." Emery gathered her notebook and blueprint tube. On the exiting staircase she noticed the blueprint glowed faintly, dust motes catching the spill of security lights, and realized the page's coffee bar outline now mirrored her mental picture exactly. She thought of her parents' shuttered cafe, of paper cranes, of first cups turned into first chances. Down on the dock, taxi lights rippled across the river like blinking promises. She inhaled deep, tasting sawdust and lake breeze. The storm that had delayed a flight seemed distant history now, but its electricity still charged the air, nested in unfinished beams, stored in hidden rewrites of 2 carefully mapped lives. Emery felt the current tingling under her skin as she descended into night, already anticipating the crackle of tomorrow's possibilities. Morning rolled in on a low ceiling of pewter cloud, the kind of Chicago sky that flattened everything beneath it into subdued grayscale. Emery arrived at the warehouse with coffee for the crew, 8 cardboard cartons balanced on a dolly she'd borrowed from the corner bodega. Luciana's workers greeted her with teasing applause as she parceled out steaming cups and breakfast empanadas still hot from a Pilsen bakery. The aroma of chorizo and cinnamon cut through the usual metallic tang of saw blades and wet concrete. Even the most stoic carpenters softened long enough to say gracias. Covey slipped in a few minutes after 8, dressed in slate slacks and an indigo button-down, freshly pressed but already dusted by plaster as if the building had decided to claim him. He carried a roll of butcher paper and a slender laptop. Their eyes met across a maze of sawhorses, that invisible current from the night before snapped tight again. She offered a silent salute with her travel mug. He lifted his own in reply. The first half of the day tore by in a blur of noise and grit. Emery confirmed the reclaimed oak delivery, negotiated a 5% discount on the Italian espresso machine by offering to feature the vendor's logo on opening week posters, and crawled under floor joists to mark lines for conduit sleeves the electricians had missed. Every so often she heard Covey's voice echo through the skeleton hallways, firm, precise, but threaded with a new warmth she hadn't detected at Harper Quarter's downtown tower. He was talking to people, not calendars. Shortly before noon a sleek black Escalade rolled through the loading gate, its presence out of place among beat-up pickups and rental box trucks. A driver in a charcoal suit opened the rear door, and Darrow Ridge stepped onto the cracked asphalt. He was trim for 50, hair steel gray and parted with surgeon accuracy, wearing an oxblood leather jacket that cost more than most of Luciana's tools combined. His gaze swept the building with the fast assessment of someone used to converting risk into leverage. Covey met him by the freight dock. Emery kept her distance, wiping mortar dust from her arms, but she couldn't help observing. Ridge clapped the younger man's shoulder, exchanged a few collegial words, then pointed at the half-demolished grain silos with a frown. Covey's posture remained open, explanatory. Ridge shook his head twice, stabbed the air with a rolled document, and finally gestured to a woman stepping from the SUV, Ridge's analyst, Page, tablet already in hand, eyes scanning ROI charts even as she walked. Covey beckoned Emery over. She swallowed, tugged at her ponytail, and approached. Darrow, this is Emery Sloan, the creative director of the Community Hub. She'll walk us through the vision. Creative Director. The title dropped into existence like a bridge materializing over a chasm. Emery extended a hand, Ridge's shake was brief and cool. Harper tells me you'll monetize a giveaway, Ridge said without preamble. I'm skeptical but curious. Show me. She led them to the chalk outlines that only she could fully see. Workers had cleared debris so the footprint of the future coffee bar sat open, dust-mopped, silently pleading to be real. Emery unrolled the butcher paper on the floor, Covey weighted corners with spare bricks. Sketched in charcoal was a timeline of the customer journey. Guest enters, greeted with an offered cup, asked one question, what brings you joy today? The answer determined the stamp on their loyalty token, sun for creativity, leaf for growth, wave for balance. Each stamp unlocked a rotating perk in the co-working floors above, a free podcast studio hour, a guided meditation, a packet of heirloom basil seeds to grow on the terrace garden. She talked about softness in hard places, about how giving first lowered cortisol spikes in workers operating under high cognitive load. Behind her words, she felt Covey's presence, steady and attentive, though he never interrupted. Ridge paced the chalk lines, brows knit, occasionally flicking a glance to Page, who nodded when cost projections matched her data. What stops freeloaders from draining inventory? Ridge finally asked. Nothing, Emery answered, holding his gaze. But we aren't measuring waste, we're measuring conversion. First cups aren't lost dollars. They're seeds. People who feel welcomed linger longer, invite colleagues, book meeting rooms. We'll track dwell time and secondary spend. If the metrics fail, we adjust recipes, but the first cup stays free. That's the brand covenant. Ridge folded his arms. Covenants flatter. Balance sheets decide. Emery pointed to a side panel on the paper showing month 6 projections. Cafe breaks even at 68% capacity, assuming only 40% of free cup guests purchase a second item. Harper Quarters membership churn drops 2 points, enough to justify the build-out 3 times over. Covey had provided the raw numbers overnight, she had translated them into pencil graphs keyed to Ridge's appetite. Page's stylus hovered over her tablet. Models align, she murmured. Ridge exhaled, a reluctant concession. I'll support the pilot on one condition, show a tangible artifact for launch day. I need something camera-ready. Emery glanced around the dust-choked expanse, mind whirring. Her eyes landed on the enormous decommissioned hopper bucket still dangling from an overhead rail. Give me that, she said. We degrease it, sandblast the interior, weld in a circular banquette. It becomes the cafe's nucleus, and the backdrop for your ribbon cutting. Ridge followed her gaze, and for the first time his mouth twitched toward a smile. Make it structurally safe, code-compliant, photo-worthy by press week, and I'm satisfied. He strode off toward his SUV, Page trailing. Covey let out a breath he'd been holding. You just adopted a 2-ton antique and a 3-week deadline, he said. She laughed, half delirious. You schedule dance breaks, I'll schedule miracles. The afternoon shifted into higher gear. Luciana allocated a welding crew, an architect drafted load calculations, Emery sketched seating curves on a roll of masking paper, kneeling inside the rust-orange bucket while sparks showered above. Covey negotiated with a reclaimed steel supplier and rerouted a forklift for immediate pickup. At dusk, as Ridge's conditions ricocheted through the project like an electrical surge, an accident snapped the day's momentum. A junior carpenter misjudged the balance of a beam and let it crash onto the 3D printer Harper Quarters had positioned to prototype furniture joints. Plastic shards scattered over the floor, the carpenter froze, eyes wide with terror, replacement cost exceeded his annual wages. Emery hurried over, heart pounding. Covey arrived seconds later. The crew braced for shouting. Instead, Emery crouched, picked up a broken printer panel, and ran her fingers over the jagged edge. She remembered her pitch about turning failures into features. Without thinking, she turned to Luciana. Can we reassemble the casing in an asymmetric mosaic? Patch the gaps with clear resin so the fracture lines stay visible. Luciana studied the pieces, expression unreadable, then nodded once. We can try. Covey caught on. Sell it opening night as functional art. Story drives bids. Emery smiled at the carpenter. Your accident just became the first piece in our rotating gallery. Relief softened his shoulders. Luciana barked orders, and the crisis dissolved into productive buzz. Night settled. The warehouse smelled of ozone, linseed, coffee grounds from a test batch Emery brewed on a portable stove. She and Covey carried mugs to the hopper bucket, climbed inside, and sat back to back on a rough plywood slab that would become the banquette's base. The city skyline shimmered through a jagged hole in the brick wall, stars drowned by amber light pollution yet still insistently there. Covey broke the comfortable silence. Ridge thinks in quarters, not chapters. Today you gave him a narrative he could monetize. Thank you. You gave me a stage, she replied. And a safety net I didn't know I'd need. Their shoulders touched, subtle, heat blooming where fabric met fabric. Emery realized her old panic response was absent, instead there was a deep, resonant calm, as if the building's timbers drummed in sync with her heartbeat. He turned slightly, voice low. There's dust in your hair again. Her breath caught. You and dust, she murmured, but she didn't flinch when his fingers brushed an errant strand from her forehead. The gesture lingered. In the half-light his eyes were more gray than blue, reflecting steel beams overhead. Outside, a breeze rattled loose plastic sheeting, sending moonlit ripples across the floor. Emery's pulse rose, not out of fear but from the exquisite uncertainty of proximity. She closed her eyes, breathed 4 counts, held 2, released 6. Beside her, Covey matched the cadence. They sat like that, breathing each other steady, until Luciana's whistle echoed that the site was locking up. Emery and Covey climbed down, feet tingling on the metal rungs. At the door he paused. 7 a.m. tomorrow, he said. Bucket sanding. She saluted with her empty mug. First cup's on me. Walking to the train, Emery felt sawdust cling to her skin, embedding in the cuffs of her jacket. She resisted the urge to brush it off. The dust was proof, of demolition underway, of a space becoming real, of 2 lives edging from parallel lines toward an intersection neither had planned. Above the river, the clouds parted just enough to reveal a sliver of moon, shining like a thumbnail of promise. The warehouse air tasted of iron filings and river fog when Emery arrived at sunrise with a playlist of 70s soul queued on her phone and 2 industrial bags of coarse sand. Dew still glazed the cracked loading dock. Her sneaker soles squeaked as she crossed to the hopper bucket that now loomed like an overturned battleship in the center of the floor. Overnight, Luciana's crew had rigged a cradle of nylon straps around the relic and winched it to a gentle tilt, exposing rust-pocked flanks the color of dried blood. Emery ran her palm along the steel, felt flakes shift beneath her skin, and pictured the surface polished to a dark graphite sheen, upholstered in rough linen, candlelight flickering against stories of grain and grease held in every weld. Covey strode in a moment later, chewing on the tail end of a protein bar, eyes already tracking progress points across the space. He wore the same slate slacks as yesterday, but the button-down had been replaced by a plain white tee bearing a tiny, hand-stitched H at the hem, one of HarperCorder's earliest prototypes. Without greeting, he unrolled a spool of orange extension cord, plugged in a variable speed grinder, and handed Emery a set of noise-canceling earmuffs. She shook her head. Manual first. Feel the imperfections. She hefted a sanding block. Heart before hardware. He hesitated, then shrugged, picking up a block without comment. They climbed onto scaffold planks and began to scrub, abrasives rasping, rust dust floating in molasses slow spirals. The soundtrack crackled from her phone, Marvin Gaye's baritone slid between the grinder's whine and the distant thunk of hammer drills. Hour by hour, the bucket shed its scales and revealed swirling striations where molten seams had cooled half a century ago. Around 10, Karina appeared in kitten heels much too clean for a construction site, brandishing a tablet blinking crimson appointments. She huffed at the sight of her CEO in a t-shirt streaked with oxidized orange. Call at 10:30 with the Jakarta landlord, she reminded, eyes flicking to Emery as if weighing her influence over Covey's wardrobe. Slides need your final voiceover. Covey's lips pressed thin. Push 10 minutes. Karina looked ready to protest, but Emery interjected. We'll take 5 anyway, hydrate and vacuum the dust. She offered Karina a wet wipe with a grin that surprised even herself. She'd spent years avoiding simple contact, yet here she was bridging discomfort for the sake of momentum. After Karina retreated, Covey muttered, she schedules my pulse. Emery tossed him a bottle of seltzer. Lucky thing I'm teaching you to breathe manually. They shared the bottle, trading small sips, until static bloomed across Covey's smartwatch, an alert from HQ's downtown tower. A frown pulled at his brow. Problem? Emery asked. City compliance team wants a walkthrough tomorrow. A random audit triggered by structural modification of historical artifact. He flicked a finger toward the bucket. Which isn't structural, just decorative, she argued. They can still halt work with a yellow tag if they smell liability. He exhaled, rust flecks snowing from the stubble now roughening his jaw. Ridge will riot if he sees delays. Emery climbed down, yanked a Sharpie from her back pocket, and scrawled on the side of the bucket, this is not a load-bearing element. Ask me why. She flashed a grin. We'll turn the audit into a tour. He laughed, genuine and warm, tension cracking like ice under sunlight. In that moment, dust in her hair no longer felt like grime but glitter. They resumed sanding until noon when Luciana declared lunch, shepherding workers outside to picnic tables facing the river. Emery plopped onto a pallet beside Covey, unwrapping sandwiches from a cooler she'd stocked at dawn. As they ate, gulls circled, and the skyline shimmered through haze. Conversation drifted from supplier lead times to childhood recipes. Covey confessed he'd once tried to bake banana bread as a late apology to his mother after forgetting her birthday, only to deploy an entire fire extinguisher when the loaf combusted. Overscheduled the oven timer? Emery teased. Underscheduled common sense, he replied. Their shoulders brushed, and a quiet chord hummed beneath her sternum, a recognition of having crossed some invisible field line between colleagues and something unspoken. Mid-bite, her phone vibrated. Caller ID, Dad. She hesitated, since the cafe's closure her father rarely phoned midday. She answered, voice low. The news tumbled out, her mother's arthritis had flared, medical bills were stacking again, he'd read about Chicago construction accidents and worried she lacked insurance. I'm fine, Dad, she soothed, but anxiety coiled inside her. The cost of dreams suddenly felt carnivorous. She slid the phone away, staring at the river until Covey nudged her knee. You vanished for a minute, he said. Family finances. She forced a smile. Long story with recurring villains. Tell me tonight, he offered. We'll plot a heist on their behalf. Their dust-coated crew returned. Emery briefed them on tomorrow's surprise inspection, turning potential dread into a game, polish tools, align safety signage, rehearse talking points about non-load-bearing art. Luciana slapped a fist to her chest in salute and barked orders like a drill sergeant proud of fresh recruits. By 4, sunlight angled molten and the bucket gleamed, half-sanded, patterns of raw steel catching fire where Emery's and Covey's strokes had overlapped. She stepped back, hand on her lower back, satisfied ache radiating through muscles. Covey clambered down, wiping sweat with his forearm. Phase 1 accomplished. Time to meet the architect for HVAC overrides. He paused. Join me. Your airflow plan affects vent placement. They walked the unfinished hallway to an elevator cage hung with fairy-light strings, Luciana's whim to keep morale bright after dusk. The ride 50 feet up felt suspended in its own time zone. When the gate rattled open on the roof, the city exploded around them, skyscrapers stabbing low clouds, lake horizon glowing pewter, gulls dipping through steam vents. The HVAC architect, an elderly man named Yusuf, greeted them with rolled duck schematics. While Covey and Yusuf debated static pressure, Emery wandered to a parapet edging the roof. Wind lifted sweaty hair from her nape. Below, the river sliced darkly between aging brick stacks and new glass condos. She imagined the cafe lights glowing at dusk, first cup customers drifting in, conversation ricocheting around grain silo columns. A hand touched her elbow, gentle, grounding. Covey stood beside her, Yusuf having retreated to measure vent grills. She realized she'd been teetering on the lip of the parapet, lost in future reverie. Covey's fingers tightened just once, then relaxed, but they didn't fully withdraw. Careful, he murmured. We can't serve coffee if the architect falls. She could smell rust and detergent on his shirt, a strangely comforting note. Words rose unfiltered, I'm afraid I might ruin this opportunity. What if free coffee doesn't cover medical copays, or rent hikes, or my parents' debts? He turned to face her fully, city wind snapping his hair. Failure's a decimal. Regret's an exponent. We budget for decimals. Color prickled behind her eyes, something between gratitude and shock at the clarity of his faith. She exhaled, felt air rush down to steady feet, and the old tactile panic remained absent. Instead, her body leaned a fraction closer, subtle as turning toward warmth in winter. A phone buzz broke the moment, Covey's calendar alarm. He checked, smiled, and without explanation opened his Spotify app. A bouncy funk track spilled from the phone speaker. He held out a hand. Mandatory random dance break, he said, voice only slightly teasing. She scanned the bleak roof, the astonished HVAC architect, the swirl of gulls. Laughter bubbled. She placed her hand in his. They moved, awkward, offbeat, but seconds later found a rhythm synced to Sander strokes from earlier, to Marvin Gaye, to the 4-2-6 breath. Yusuf chuckled and resumed measuring, pretending not to see while the CEO and the cafe dreamer spun a sloppy circle against the skyline. Emery's heart pounded not with fear but with a wild momentum that tasted of lake wind and possibility. They stopped, breathless. Covey's palm still clasped hers, warm and calloused from sandpaper work. He didn't release it right away. The clouds parted to reveal a wash of late sunlight that bathed the rooftop in gold. Payment accepted, he said softly. For what? For teaching a company man the value of unscheduled gravity. Below, the river kept its patient course. Tomorrow the inspectors would arrive with bureaucratic clipboards, Ridge's ROI would climb or teeter depending on line items, her parents' bills would still sit unanswered in a kitchen drawer back home. But here, above the dust and deadlines, the scaffold between what was and what could be felt sturdy enough to stand on. Emery squeezed his hand once, letting the pressure say what her startled mouth could not. He returned the squeeze, 4 counts in, 2 hold, 6 out, and together they watched the sun bleed into the lake, knowing the bucket down below waited to become a heart, and that sometimes the simplest architecture required only trust layered on the bones of steel and rust. Darrow Ridge arrived for the surprise inspection in a charcoal overcoat cinched tight against the lake wind, but the city compliance officers beat him by 14 minutes. Emery saw them first through the freight door slats, 2 women and 1 man in city-issued hard hats, clipboards tucked under rain ponchos. She wiped her hands on her canvas apron, willed her pulse into the 4/2/6 rhythm Covey had drilled into her, and strode out to greet them before their boots hit the threshold. The taller inspector, Gabriela Montez, introduced herself without removing her hood. She spoke with brisk precision. They would review load calculations for the repurposed hopper bucket, verify dust abatement procedures, and confirm that any historical artifact remained non-structural. Emery handed over copies of Luciana's engineering report and the memo scrawled in permanent marker, "This is not a LOAD-bearing element, ask me why." Montez's mouth twitched at the handwritten audacity, though she gave no clue whether it amused or irritated her. Covey appeared moments later, barbered neat again after an early meeting downtown, but he'd kept the indigo shirt and rolled sleeves, as if to telegraph that this site, not a boardroom, was his chosen battleground today. He shook hands with each inspector, gestured toward the industrial bucket now gleaming like museum steel on its sling. Luciana's crew had polished all night, sealed seams with matte clear coat, and anchored the cradle spreader bars to 4 beefy lag bolts sunk into the slab. The artifact looked less like a rusted relic than a sculptural promise. While inspectors measured weld beads and photographed anchor points, Ridge paced near the bucket, tapping his phone. Emery overheard fragments: London fund managers, Q3 press tour, risk containment. Every so often he glanced at her, the crease between his brows deepening. The younger inspector, Jensen, crouched to read the new brass plate bolted to the bucket base. Harperquarters Community Anchor Number 1. Grain to story. He snapped a photo, then whispered something to Montez. She nodded, turned to Emery. "Tell me why," she said. Emery's throat dried, but she launched into the narrative, how the bucket once hoisted Midwestern wheat onto barges bound for the world, how its scars mapped a century of labor, how customers would now sit inside the vessel sharing first cups of coffee and stories of risk, how that symbolism transformed potential liability into a living exhibit. She kept her voice even, accepting her own reverence. Montez listened without interrupting, pen poised above her checklist as if weighing intangible mass. The inspectors huddled. Ridge used the lull to bark quietly at Covey that overruns were mounting, that any delay would spook sponsors. Covey murmured calm rebuttals, but Emery sensed friction under the civility. Montez returned. "Your artifact remains non-load-bearing, ventilation plan meets negative pressure requirements, and dust control is commendable." She initialed 3 lines. "No red or yellow tags today." She offered a small smile that felt like a benediction. Luciana's crew erupted in cheers. Someone cranked up a cumbia track on a job site speaker. Emery exhaled a breath she hadn't realized she'd trapped. But Ridge did not look relieved. He pocketed his phone, eyes fixed on Covey. "Good news buys us 48 hours, he said. "After that, press week begins and the bucket better seat test guests without litigation." His gaze flicked to Emery. "Meaning the free coffee stunt must prove conversion projections immediately. Otherwise we convert this floor into premium pods and call it done." Emery opened her mouth to answer, but Covey cut in. "She'll meet the numbers," he said firmly. "And the cafe will open on schedule." Ridge studied him. "Your conviction is expensive." Then he turned on his heel and strode out to the waiting SUV, shoes snapping on concrete like gavel strikes. The music resumed its sway, but tension hung in the sawdust. Covey's shoulders slumped briefly before he straightened, scanning the site. Emery touched his arm. "We'll make the numbers," she said, hearing more certainty than she felt. He managed a tight smile. "Tonight I'll revise the cost curve." He hesitated, lowered his voice. "And after, maybe you can tell me how to keep investors from raiding the soul out of this place." Over croissants, she suggested. There's a 24-hour bakery on Milwaukee with coffee strong enough to interrogate you. Put it on my calendar. He checked his watch. Dance break at 5:40. She rolled her eyes fondly. I'll bring the playlist. They worked until twilight. Emery coordinated with the upholstery vendor, choosing a nubby olive fabric that matched the mossy green in the HQ logo. She recorded a video message for social media, nothing fancy, just her dusty face explaining the bucket's transformation. Karina would schedule it to drop during press week, giving Ridge the tangibility he demanded. While the camera was rolling, Emery glimpsed herself in the phone screen, cheeks flushed, hair frizzed from humidity, eyes bright with exhaustion, and realized she looked like her mother after a record shift behind the cafe counter, spent yet alive. Sometime after 8 the main crew clocked out, leaving only Luciana, who welded after hours by choice, and 2 electricians chasing circuits in the mezzanine. Covey fetched takeout bibimbap bowls from a Korean taco truck and found Emery sketching on the plywood banquette frame, mapping seat depths. They ate inside the bucket, legs dangling. Neon boats cruised down the river, spreading fans of magenta light. Exhaustion made Emery lightheaded, and the spicy gochujang lifted moisture to her eyes. She thought about calling her parents, sharing the inspection victory, but the weight of their debts sat like a stone at the base of her throat. Maybe she'd wait until there was revenue, not just promise. Covey sensed the shift. Bad news? He asked gently. Not yet. Just wages of hope. She forced a laugh. Costs nothing until the bill arrives. He set his bowl aside, turned so his knee touched hers. Tell me the number. She stared at him. What? Your parents' arrears. Tell me. His tone held no pity, only logistics, but the kindness beneath it cracked something inside her. 84,000 for the second mortgage. 26 on medical cards. Probably a few more small things I don't know. He nodded, as if adding columns in real time. Consider it a convertible note, Maple and Thread Equity buys out their debt. They get relief, you keep ownership. Her protest jammed in her throat. I'm not taking charity. Nor am I offering it, he said. If your cafe hits its projections, my note converts into dividend shares for them. If it doesn't, I absorb the loss as cost of learning. Either way, the stress no longer anchors your ankles. Emotion surged, gratitude, shame, fierce affection. Why? She whispered. You barely know me. I know the texture of your courage, he replied. And I know what fear of collapse does to decision-making. Remove the fear, watch the bloom. Tears breached despite her clenched jaw. She swiped them angrily. I hate crying in front of executives. I'm not an executive right now, he said. Just another person trying to balance a ledger between regret and possibility. Shyness flickered in his eyes. And maybe someone who wants to dance on a roof again without thinking about quarterly burn. She laughed through the tears. Music's cued. She stood, offered her hand. Payment for the note is 1 rooftop waltz per month until the cafe breaks even. Index-linked dance payments, he murmured, taking her hand. Deal. They stepped out of the bucket into the echoing hall. Somewhere Luciana's torch hissed, sparks bright as fireflies. Covey set his phone to play a slow, grainy Otis Redding track, cigarette-drawn horns, starlight percussion. They circled each other on dusty concrete, awkward at first, then smoother. Emery felt the press of his palm against her waist, the surety in his posture. She smelled rust, pepper sauce, and a note of cedar from his shirt. Her pulse stuttered but held steady. When the song faded, they remained close, breaths mingling. The warehouse lights shut off automatically at 10, plunging them into near darkness lit only by city glow through broken windows. Covey's thumb brushed the back of her hand. 4 in, he murmured. She inhaled. 2 hold. She held. 6 out. The exhale trembled. He bent, slowly, giving her space to retreat, but she rose onto toes to meet him. The kiss was gentle, exploratory, dust-tinged, flavored with gochujang and coffee and something wild. It lasted until a rivet gun clacked in the mezzanine, startling them back into reality. They separated, laughter bubbling soft and conspiratorial. "Tomorrow," he said, voice hoarse. "Bucket sanding phase 2, she agreed, brushing rust flakes from his shoulder. Walking to the train later, Emery replayed the day's ledger: inspectors 1, investor mollified, parents' debt dangled an offer, first kiss stolen under welding sparks. It was too much to file under either triumph or peril, so she filed it under becoming. The city lights blurred as the train rocked south, and in the glass she saw her reflection framed by neon graffiti that read "Choose your chaos." She smiled, touched fingertips to lips still tingling, and chose. At 5:30 the next morning Emery woke to her phone vibrating like a trapped bee on the motel nightstand. For one sweet second she thought it might be Covey, something playful about playlists or coffee beans, but the caller ID showed her father. Panic shot her fully awake. "Dad? Is Mom all right?" His voice, husky with exhaustion, fought a wobble. "She's sleeping. I wanted you to hear it from me before the bank called. They're escalating the foreclosure. 30 days. Emery pressed a hand to her forehead. "I thought you had a grace agreement." "They sold the mortgage to a hedge fund. New rules." Paper rustled, probably one of the warning letters. "I won't take your boyfriend's handout, Emmy. We'll figure something." A flush crawled up her neck. "He isn't," she stopped. Since last night's kiss, she didn't yet know what to call Covey. But the bigger truth was this debt noose tightening fast. "Dad, wait. There's a way, but I need time. Promise me you won't sign anything else until I call back." After she hung up, she sat motionless in the dim room, phone glowing with unread alerts. One was a calendar ping from Covey: "Sunrise bucket sanding phase 2, bring that playlist." The other, flagged urgent, came from Karina: "Media inquiry, Wall Street Journal wants comment on HQ CEO, personal loan, to project manager." Attached was a screenshot of a financial blogger's tweet insinuating Covey was using company funds to bankroll his latest romantic venture. Emery's pulse thrummed. How had the blogger learned about the note? Only 4 people knew. Ridge, she realized. A leak designed to spook shareholders days before press week. In the same hour, her parents' house risked collapse and their reputation threatened hers. She dressed, shoved a change of clothes into her tote, and caught the first bus to the river site, sunrise streaking pale coral behind smokestacks. The warehouse buzzed earlier than usual, crews rushing to make up hours lost to compliance visits. Emery avoided the main entrance, slipping instead through a side door into the bucket's cavernous embrace. She needed sanctuary to think. The banquette frame smelled of cut oak. She traced the curve where cushions would run and inhaled slow. The cafe's first principle, generosity, still felt right. She just had to widen its arc. A familiar tread approached. She turned. Covey stood on the scaffold, hard hat tucked under one arm, worry creasing the skin between his brows. "I heard from Karina," he said. "Ridge is floating rumors I misused operating capital." Emery climbed the short ladder to join him. "My dad called. The bank's foreclosing. If Ridge made this public, the convertible note solution is poison. It'll look like nepotism, not investment." Covey's jaw tightened. "Then we convert differently. Let Ridge see us go transparent. Crowdfund the first year of cups, let supporters pre-buy drinks. Turn a liability into social equity." She blinked. "You'd open your flagship finances to strangers. If it keeps the soul intact. And your parents' house intact." Thunder of a sudden drill reverberated. She steadied herself on a rail. "We'll need a pitch video by tomorrow." He nodded once. I'll cancel afternoon meetings. There's something else. He took out his phone, pulled up an email from HQ's legal counsel. It warned that any perceived romantic relationship between CEO and Community Hub director required immediate disclosure, review, and possibly recusal under company policy. HR saw the blog post and jumped to conclusions, he said. I'll handle them. But whatever this is, between us, it has to survive sunlight. Her cheeks heated, but she met his gaze. Then let's give it sunlight. They descended. Luciana flagged them down to inspect fresh welds. Emery bent over join lines, mind already editing a storyboard, phase shift from abandoned bucket to beacon of second chances. She shot rough footage on her phone, spark showers, dusty smiles, free cup chalk slogans. Covey coordinated with Karina to secure a rooftop drone slot at golden hour. By 10 a.m. they had a skeleton cut. Still, tension coiled as lunchtime approached, Ridge's daily drop-in window. Emery rehearsed talking points while brushing rust from her shirt. She didn't notice the tall woman in linen blazer until she was almost upon her, Paige, Ridge's analyst, tablet in hand. Except today Paige's expression wasn't attached, her eyes flicked around, then settled on Emery with cautious urgency. Quickly, Paige murmured. Darrow aims to present a replacement plan. Private equity partner wants this entire floor turned into luxury micro-offices. He'll drop the free coffee PR bomb as evidence of fiscal recklessness. She slipped a thumb drive into Emery's palm. Behind his back I ran numbers on your customer lifetime value scenario. It beats his micro-office yield by 11% year 3. Show that to the board before he corners them. I never leaked the loan. He did. Emery stared, stunned. Why help us? Paige's mouth curved, almost a smile. Because I came from a family diner in Kansas. First cup was always free. Then she pivoted and walked briskly toward the freight lifts. An hour later Ridge swept in with a pair of suited strangers. The warehouse murmured to hush. He launched into polished remarks about fiduciary discipline and focus on core co-working competencies, insinuating that side projects should wait until profitability. Emery stepped forward, projector ready. At her signal, Covey dimmed the work lamps. The hastily cut video filled the rough brick wall, time-lapse of the bucket gleaming under grinders, first cups poured from a camping kettle, the phrase grained to story stenciled in white on steel. Then slides, Paige's covert spreadsheets, compared micro-office rent curves against the cafe's churn reduction model. Numbers danced, 8.9% net promoter score lift, 46% longer tenant tenure, spillover revenue per seat. Ridge tried to interrupt, but Covey's calm baritone overrode. Transparency, Darrow. You taught me that investors fear opacity. He clicked to the final slide, a live countdown timer above a crowdfunding link. Already the bar crept right, hundreds of micro-pledges pouring in from employees and social media followers who'd clicked the teaser Emery posted 20 minutes earlier. We hit $100,000, every pledge turns into a token for a first cup, Emery said. Parents in danger of losing homes get to keep them via our revenue. No corporate funds, no ethical quandary. Silence thickened. One of Ridge's suited guests raised a hand. This generates press week gold, he said. Authentic community narrative. I advise we watch. Ridge's jaw twitched but he offered a shark smile and a measured nod. Work resumed, tension drained. By 4 o'clock the crowdfunding bar crossed $250,000, the warehouse erupted in cheers, and Emery ducked behind a column to wipe tears of stunned relief. Her phone buzzed, Dad again. When she answered, his voice wavered. A journalist called. Said strangers just paid off our mortgage. She pressed her forehead to the cool brick. Not strangers, Dad. Customers, she whispered. Her mother's voice chimed faintly in the background, joyful, disbelieving. Emery promised details soon and hung up, throat aching. Covey found her there. Wordlessly he opened his arms, she stepped in, cheek against rust-dusted cotton. They stayed until Luciana's final drill gun clicked empty. Later, on the roof for their scheduled dance break, drone cameras zipped overhead capturing sunset shots for tomorrow's marketing push. Covey pulled her close, Otis Redding crooning again from his phone. Emery rested her head on his chest, feeling the steady thump beneath fabric. "We still have HR forms," he murmured into her hair. She laughed softly. "We'll fill them out after the next inspection." "And Ridge?" he asked. "Let him audit generosity," she said. "He'll find the ROI exponential." They twirled under drone lights until sky darkened and cityscape glittered like spilled sugar. Far below, the bucket waited, transformed, funded, indelible. And on a Kansas farmhouse table, Emery pictured her parents' hands opening a letter marked paid in full, the ink still drying on a covenant first drafted by a stranger in seat 12A during a storm-delayed flight. When the music ended, Covey checked his phone. The crowdfunding ticker blinked past $400,000. He smiled down at her. "Break even in record time," he said. "No," she corrected, pulling him back into motion as a new song began. "Break open." Press week Monday dawned crisp and electric, the sort of early autumn morning that makes Chicago's river look carved from cobalt glass. HarperQuarters had transformed the warehouse into a place that no longer smelled of rust and river rot but of espresso, lemon oil finish, and late nights gone miraculously right. Edison bulbs looped between century-old rafters. The hopper bucket, sandblasted, sealed, upholstered in olive linen, now sat at the room's heart like an enormous chalice. Guests would soon sit inside its circular banquette, coffee in hand, photographing themselves against a stenciled legend that read "First Cup, First Chance." Emery arrived before the PR crew, tracing a finger over that paint while the space still belonged to silence. Her parents were in the city for the first time in years, housed 2 floors above in a guest suite whose rent the cafe would cover within 6 months, thanks to a crowdfunding tally that had sailed past $800,000. She pictured them waking slowly, debtless for the first time this decade. A wash of warmth spread through her chest so completely she almost missed the soft footfalls behind her. Covey appeared wearing a slate suit that managed to look both editorial and lived in. No tie, collar open. In his hands he carried 2 paper cups and, balanced across their lids, a pair of wooden coffee tokens engraved with tiny cranes. "One for your first official customer," he said, "and one for the CEO who never schedules firsts but can learn." She accepted the token, tucking it into the pocket near her heart. "Press will be here in 40 minutes, she reminded, but he shook his head. "Press can wait 5. He guided her to the loading dock doors and pushed them open. Sunlight spilled across the water, igniting every window downtown. On the near bank, a brass quartet, a surprise he'd hired, launched into a hushed rendition of "When I Fall in Love." Its notes skated over the river like swallows. "I promised sunlight," he said. "And disclosure." Somewhere inside the warehouse Karina's voice called for final run-throughs. Telephoto lenses were probably already prowling the block. But here at the threshold Emery felt time loosen another notch. She sipped the coffee, Kenyan peaberry, citrus bright, and let steam blur the skyline. She turned to him, voice low. "Disclosure, then, I want the Hopper Hub to be more than a cafe. I want it franchised into every HQ city, each funding something local, a library wing, a refugee pantry, a music program. I want generosity as a policy, not a stunt." Covey's answering smile held no corporate caution, only pride. "Consider the policy drafted." "And personal disclosure," she pressed, pulse tripping in her throat. He raised his coffee in a tiny toast. "I want to build that policy with you, then catch a plane, non-delayed, to tell my mother that her son finally broke his calendar on purpose." Emotion nodded behind Emery's eyes. She breathed 4, held 2, exhaled 6, and the knot loosened enough for words. "I'll fly with you. But first we open a cafe." They stepped back inside. The PR lights flicked on, a murmur of guests swelled as journalists, investors, and city officials filtered through safety tape into curated chaos. Luciana's crew, now in clean uniforms, manned espresso stations. Paige hovered near the bucket, tablet ready with live metrics, online pre-sales already converting to loyalty stamps in real time. Darrow Ridge arrived last, flanked by 2 television cameras. He glanced at the throng, at the brass musicians, at the bucket glowing like a sanctified relic, and his practiced neutrality faltered into reluctant awe. Emery approached, extending a small enamel pin shaped like a coffee cup sprouting wings, the cafe's new icon. "For you," she said. "You invested first. You should wear first cup wings." Cameras zoomed. Ridge pinned the icon to his lapel, managing a smile that almost reached his eyes. Later he would boast to shareholders about triple-digit social media reach, but in that moment even he seemed caught by the gravity of generosity turned tangible. Karina herded principal guests toward the ribbon. Covey took the oversized scissors, but just as flashbulbs ignited, he paused. "Emery." He spoke softly, yet the PA carried his voice across brick and beam. "Our covenant begins with free coffee, but the real gift is story. Tell them yours." She hadn't prepared remarks, but she stepped forward, pulse quick but steady. "My parents taught me that everyone deserves a first cup, a chance to feel welcome before money changes hands," she said. "When their own cafe died under debt, I promised to bring that welcome to a bigger table. Harperquarters built the table, our neighbors filled it. Today every pledge written on that wall paid off a family's foreclosure notice across the country. Tomorrow, your espresso might fund a student's first saxophone or a refugee's first bookstore card. Hold your cup, tell your story, and pass it on." Applause swelled, not polite but full-bodied, spilling into the rafters. She cut the ribbon, and the cafe bloomed alive, steam vents sighed, grinders sang, laughter ricocheted off century timber. The hopper bucket filled instantly, city councilwoman, line cook, coder, retiree, all elbow to elbow in the upcycled cradle of Midwest grain. Covey slipped beside Emery during the surge. "HR forms are filed," he murmured, lips brushing her ear. "Conflict of interest approved, the board calls it synergy." He pressed something into her palm, a ring of brushed steel inset with a filament-thin band of copper reclaimed from the warehouse's original wiring. Inside, etched in minuscule script, were the numbers 426. No speech could fit in her throat, so she answered by sliding the ring onto her dust-scarred finger. Flashbulbs popped, hungry for angles, but she didn't care. She simply hooked her little finger around his, a pinky promise stronger than quarterly returns. Outside, the river carried sunlight east toward the lake, scattering coins of reflection under the bridges. Inside, first cups toppled into second, into plans for third locations, into this improbable union of schedule and chaos, ledger and miracle. And somewhere, tucked inside an apron pocket near her heart, a wooden token engraved with a crane waited for its first customer, a stranger who would walk in, cradle a free cup, and maybe feel the world tilt toward possibility just a little, the way it had the day a storm stopped a flight and wrote a love story on 2 collision courses through time.